R.I.P. my sweet lesbian ginger biscuit. You and your knowledge of 90s lesbian cinema will be very missed. Amen. The thing I'm most shaken up by from this episode is that Misty recognized Melissa without the hat. Melissa having a woman on top of her where it looks like they're about to kiss, but someone starts bleeding instead, is becoming a trope in this show, and God, I wish that were me. Tensions were high between the Alpha Wilderness daddies this episode. Unfortunately for Cody, he had no idea what he was dealing with. Thank you. I'm here all evening. Hi guys, welcome to a video, and in today's video, we're just going to be discussing thoughts and theories on episode 9 of Yellowjackets season 3. Let's start with the biggest talking point of this episode. The fiery goddess herself, a one Miss Van Palmer. Now, to be fair, the hints have been hinting that she was going to take a dirt nap this season. For example, I feel like the biggest two hints were the airplane seatbelt in Van's hallucination and younger Ty appearing to older Ty in the hospital. So the clues were there, but we, and by we I mean me, we're just ignoring that and trying to live in blissful ignorance. Okay. So anyway, in this episode, younger Van appears once again to older Van while she is in the hospital. And the first point of interest is she mentions how Shauna has ditched her, which connects back to season 1 where Van was trying to escape the plane fire. And Shauna was trying to save her, but was dragged away by Jackie. Now, I don't know that I'd say that Shauna ditched Van in season 1. She wanted to save Van, but was physically dragged away. But I do also understand why Van would think of it in that way and carry resentment over it. There's a further parallel between these two scenes, with Shauna being physically taken away from Van when she's close to death by Jackie in season 1, and with Melissa orchestrating things which draw Shauna away from Van when she's close to death in this season, which is interesting. Teen Van then starts talking about the film The Goonies. And of course, Van owned a VHS rental store and took a great interest in films, especially older or nostalgic ones, so The Goonies being a theme for her this episode connects to this. And Van points out that the film contains one of the greatest quests of all time, and mentions Treasure, the classic hero's journey, and how X marks the spot. Now, in relation to Treasure, at the hospital, Teen Van tells Adult Van that she is going to get the treasure. And in the end scene, when Adult Van says to Teen Van, "You said I was going to be the hero," Teen Van replies, "You are. You saved them. You got the real love of our life back. You show me a better treasure." And I think there are multiple interpretations of what the treasure Van is referring to represents. And let me know your own interpretations down in the comments. But as I understood it, the treasure that Teen Van was talking about was her love with the real Ty. And the treasure metaphor makes sense in that real Ty was hidden within herself and she needed Van to find her and save her. As for Van and the classic hero's journey, if we break down her arc this episode, Van embarks on a journey where she faces danger, she saves her friends, is reunited with her true love, and dies after choosing to do the right thing. And so from that perspective, I can see how the classic hero's journey is applicable to Van in this episode. As for X marks the spot, we can connect this to the scene of Van looking at Melissa and then at the X sign on the road. And this particular sign means a railroad crossing is ahead. Now, railroad tracks are universally used as a symbol for making life choices and the ability to change paths. So I was wondering if this was related to Van almost killing Melissa, but then making a different choice and therefore changing her path. But let me know your own interpretations down in the comments. Interestingly, XR can mean extended reality and is an umbrella term to refer to augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality. Basically, technology that is intended to combine or mirror the physical world with a digital twin world, which seems relevant to Van and her connection to film and technology. And interestingly, also relates back to the Jamiroquai song Virtual Insanity, Vanity that Van was singing in episode 2, because that song has lyrics which mention virtual reality and new technology, and may suggest that there could be an alternate reality or twin reality revealed to us somewhere down the line. And I know that may sound like a bit of a reach, but it has been a theme this season. So I can sort of see how the Goonies theme relates to Van's arc in this episode. But if anybody has any different interpretations on the Goonies theme, please let me know down in the comments, because I found this theme quite difficult to deconstruct and extract connections and clues from. Moving on to Van's death scene. Thankfully, my theories about Ty torturing or killing Van were very wrong. That's one good thing. But as a side note to this, it may be that Ty now captures Melissa and tortures her, which brings us back to the Princess Bride theory we were discussing last episode. Or maybe there's no torture at all and I just need to let this theory go. Okay. But anyway, we now know the kitchen is the heart of the family sign has a connection to Van being stabbed in the heart. And as previously discussed, the heart is also connected to the sacrifice theme, which is relevant here since Van's death came about because she considered using Melissa as a sacrifice. As for why Melissa chose to kill Van, initially I thought it may be linked to something that happened in the teen timeline between Van and Melissa. But according to this interview with the director for episode 9, Ben Seminoff, Melissa stabs Van because she's reverted back to her wilderness mindset. He says, "I think she wanted to be back in the game, and now she's essentially being chased through the woods again had she pulled the card. That's the reason for me. I love how that all happened, and that's why I think she stabs her at the end. This is the game. This is what you do." It's also significant that Van dies beside a fireplace, as it links back to the fire theme intertwined with her character that we've discussed many times. And more specifically, it connects to the fireplace that Van was sat in front of in the cave hallucinations. This is a point of interest because now that we know that Van's hallucination was connected to her death, what does that suggest about the other two hallucinations had by Akilah and Shauna? Does Akilah die due to the changing group dynamics, and does Shauna die or nearly die in relation to Walter? Perhaps even something to do with Walter and his boat, maybe. It also creates new theories about the snap bracelet and its connection to death. We see Akilah puts the snap bracelet on just fine, there's no struggle, which could indicate an easy death, which possibly has some relation to her saying in this episode that if she has to spend another winter in the camp, she hopes the wilderness chooses her first. But it could also mean that Akilah avoids death, especially since she's the only one out of her, Van and Shauna who doesn't get hurt by the bracelet. We see the snap bracelet causes pain and bleeding for Van, which could be related to the stabbing and betrayal aspect of her death. And Shauna has the snap bracelet placed around her neck by Jackie and is in the process of dying but struggles against it. And this could be a clue that there will be a cliffhanger in the finale where we see Shauna struggling against death, or we think that Shauna might be dead. Now, we've already discussed the rainbow aspect of the bracelet before, but now Van has been killed by Melissa, who we already know is a fruitcake and therefore has associations to rainbows. It could symbolize that Melissa has some relation to all three of these deaths or near deaths. Moving on to the final scene in this episode with Van on the plane with her younger self. They are watching their death play out on a screen, which is fitting because it relates to the movie theme intertwined with Van's character. But the Vans also have a cryptic conversation where adult Van expresses her frustration that she's dead, and teen Van replies, "Surviving was never the reward." And adult Van then asks, "What does that mean? If this isn't the ending, then tell me what happens." To which teen Van responds, "Where would be the fun in that?" And I feel like this conversation connects back to the concept of make-believe and alternate realities this season, and could be a further clue that there is more to these two timelines and the lives of these characters than we currently know. That said, there are so many possible interpretations of this ending scene. If you have any thoughts or theories, please leave them down in the comments. I also took this scene as the writers telling the audience that survival is not the point of these characters, and from there, the writer's perspective, the point to these characters and the way their stories unfold is how they contribute to the wider narrative overall. Or maybe they just wrote this when they were high as a kite at 3 a.m. I don't know. Another point of interest is that the episode ends with what I believe to be a CRT projector flashing. And a CRT projector is a video projector that is used to project images onto a screen. And so it's a fitting visual to end Van's story on. But if anyone can think of any further connections between this projector and Van's arc, or the show in general, please put them down in the comments. Moving on to Ty, while she's out cold from the fumes, we see her inside of her dream on the phone to Van. And this connects to the scene of Van presumably hallucinating that she was on the phone to Ty in episode 6. And interestingly, phones can symbolize connection, including spiritual connection, which I think may be relevant to Ty's storyline going forward. And alongside this, phones can also symbolize technological advancement for communication, which could just be connected to the theme of Van and technology in general, but may also have some relevancy to Ty's future storyline too. In Ty's phone dream, she starts fighting with other Ty, which you could interpret as representative of her internal struggles and a fight to control her emotions, and real Ty, we assume, apparently wins out and comes back to Van, which circles back to Teen Van's comment about Van getting the love of their life back. Now, we still haven't seen what Tawny was talking about when she said in an interview that she had a scene which she hoped would make people cry and throw up at the same time. So it can be assumed that that scene is going to appear in the finale. Is Ty going to go on a rampage? Is she going to hunt down Melissa and torture her? Is she going to eat Van's dead body? Place your bets. Interestingly, I also noticed that there is a parallel between Ty and Shauna when it comes to their wilderness romances this episode. Yes, the nature of their respective relationships are very different, but they are also similar in that they make both women spiral and revert back to their teenage selves when they are reunited as adults. Alongside this, both Shauna and Ty marry other people after they are rescued, and the people that they marry are not people who they were truly in love with, which circles back to the conversation Shauna and Ty had about feeling it in episode 8 of season 1. And I wonder if this parallel is coincidental or if it's purposeful. Now, I do have opinions on the way Van's death was written and on her whole storyline this season in general, but I want to wait until this season is finished before I start criticizing A, B, and C, because it's possible the finale could reveal things which change my current opinions or reframe the storylines we've seen so far. So I do have thoughts and feelings, I just don't want to speak too soon. The finale video is going to be 3 hours long. I can feel it. I can feel it in my bones. Moving on to Melissa and Shauna this episode. Oh boy, this episode was very enlightening and reframes some of what I previously thought about their relationship and where their characters are headed. We'll start with adult Shauna and Melissa, who are still locked into their homoerotic kitchen fight. Now, there's a similar back and forth between them to what we saw last episode. But interestingly, Melissa asks Shauna, "How can you do this?" To which Shauna responds, "It should be obvious by now." And I actually wanted to ask you guys what you made of that line, because for me, I think that Shauna was referring to the fact that doing this kind of feeds something inside of her. And I think it's a really interesting line because it's very revealing about a part of her character. But I'm curious to know what other people think. Another point of interest is that there's a parallel between this scene and the teen timeline, with Shauna choosing to humiliate Melissa instead of killing her. And there's a further parallel with adult Shauna taking a chunk out of Melissa's arm, and teen Shauna grazing Melissa's arm with a bullet. And in both timelines, this scares Melissa, but interestingly, in the adult timeline, we can see Melissa smiling to herself in the car after she escapes. relationships. And if we go back to episode 2, Melissa kisses Shauna after Shauna holds a knife to her throat. So is Melissa enjoying this for personal reasons, for science, or is she just pleased that she's managed to kind of crack Shauna and drag her back into this kind of violent mindset? This is so interesting to me. We also see adult Melissa encouraging Ty and Van's doubts around Shauna in this episode and trying to push the wedge in. And one thing that stood out is it read to me that Melissa was pretending that the Adam situation was brand new information. And I get the feeling that she already knew about it, potentially via Walter. And speaking of Walter, interestingly, there's a parallel between him and Melissa in this episode, with Walter trying to plant seeds of doubt in Misty against Shauna, and Melissa doing the same thing with Ty and Van, which adds more weight to the theory that Melissa and Walter are connected. After seeing what went down in the teen timeline this episode, I thought there was a strong possibility that Melissa may be targeting Shauna for revenge purposes. But going back to the interview with Ben Seminoff for episode 9, he actually explains Melissa's motives. He says, Shauna is completely miserable in her life, and I think Melissa feels similarly. I think one of the things I wanted to do was really parallel Shauna and Melissa. It wasn't necessarily there 100% in the writing, but I made some choices, like the minivan that Melissa has. I really wanted the two women to be living similar lives and be similarly sick of it. Melissa had got away with faking her death and flying under the radar, and I think she was just like, how am I going to regain that excitement? I'm going to let the Yellowjackets know I'm alive. They're going to come after me, and then all hell's going to break loose. I think this is what she wanted. So a lot of this interview confirms things we've already discussed about Shauna and Melissa in the adult timeline, but it also reveals that Melissa is thrill-seeking as opposed to getting revenge with Shauna. This confirmation also adds weight to the penguin hat theory from last episode, that the penguin symbolizes that Melissa is devoted to Shauna as opposed to her wife and child. As a side note here, I forgot to mention this last episode, but Melissa's penguin hat also connects to the prominent bird theme this season, which we know has a connection to cruelty in consumption and death. And of course, we now know this connects to Shauna biting a chunk out of Melissa's arm and feeding it to her. It's also potentially another clue that someone is going to try and sacrifice Melissa again or torture her. Yes, there is no escape from the torture theory. This confirmation of Melissa thrill-seeking also reshapes the Walter and Melissa connection theory, because Walter is clearly trying to set Shauna up and is also playing games with her. But what's his motive? Walter's actions with Shauna made a lot more sense from the possibility that he was related to Melissa and helping her seek revenge for what happened to her in the teen timeline. But if Melissa is thrill-seeking, where does that leave Walter in this equation? My best guess now is that Walter is either in the process of trying to track Melissa down because she's a long-lost relative, or they don't know that they're related or connected yet, which ruins my Barbara Walters theory, unfortunately, but it could be something that's going to be exposed in the finale. I'll add here that I still think there's a further connection between Cody and Walter, which is also going to be revealed. All of these potential connections are starting to form a bit of a web at this point. In the teen timeline, Shauna is now fully treating Melissa like dirt. She catches Melissa bonding and having a moment with Hannah and reacts very badly. And it's interesting because Shauna appears just after Melissa makes a joke about teenage girls being even hornier than wild frogs, which suggests Shauna's sexuality factors into her jealousy in this moment. To add to this, I definitely also sensed some sexual tension in Shauna and Melissa's adult timeline kitchen fight, which is likely purposeful as we've discussed the visual symbolism and connotations around their relationship being tied into sex and violence. However, we've really only seen more of the violent side so far, but the point is, Shauna and Melissa both get something out of the intertwinement of these two things. And in the conversation where teen Melissa goes after Shauna, Melissa is explaining to Shauna about Hannah's child and says she must really miss her. And Shauna responds with, "I'm glad you have so much sympathy for her," to which Melissa replies, "It's not a competition." This is a very layered conversation because they are talking about children. And of course, this touches a nerve with Shauna because of her own dead child, which not only highlights Shauna's unresolved trauma, but also how she uses that to justify her behavior and as a tool of manipulation. one. There's also a layer of jealousy and insecurity, where Shauna sees Melissa as her comfort blanket and possession, which she doesn't want to share with anyone else. And there's an even further layer to this of Shauna masking her real feelings for Melissa, and insecurities over losing her the same way she lost Jackie and her child, by lashing out at her. In a twisted way, Shauna is trying to get reassurance from Melissa here, but because she can't communicate her needs in a healthy way, she ends up trying to do that by demeaning and controlling her, because with that way, she doesn't have to be vulnerable. But of course, by trying to hold on to Melissa in this way, it has the opposite effect. Funnily enough, Shauna isn't wrong about Hannah being manipulative, because we learn that Hannah gave Alex up for adoption. So her story about watching Nickelodeon with her child was a lie that she was using to try and gain Melissa's sympathy. However, Shauna falsely assumes that Hannah is lying about having a child altogether, which is clearly why she looks so shocked at the revelation of it on the tape. Another thing to note here is it's looking likely that there's going to be more to the story between Hannah and Melissa, because Hannah has clocked that there's something going on between Shauna and Melissa, and like with Cody, I can see her using that to her advantage. And I can also see any manipulation tactics or mind games getting messy very quickly. Another point of interest is that adult Shauna also makes a face in the scene where Ty mentions that Jen and Melissa got close to Hannah, which could be another clue that something happens connected to Shauna, Hannah and Melissa. Could it be that Melissa will get closer to Hannah to spite Shauna? Will Hannah try and manipulate Shauna's feelings to her advantage? Has adult Melissa gone after Hannah's daughter purely to continue spiting Shauna in some way? It's also notable that teen Shauna is playing with Hannah's hair in bed, serial killer style, because this is a visual suggestion that there's about to be some kind of game playing or intertwinement between them. And interestingly, this happens in the same scene that Shauna is looking over at Melissa's empty bed, which creates a further connection between the three of them. And speaking of Shauna looking at the empty bed, it's clear she's thinking about Melissa and is bothered by her leaving. Now, this may be because Melissa is against her now and possibly a threat, or it could be because she loves Melissa but won't admit it out of pride. Shauna is a character who has real trouble being vulnerable or dealing with her feelings in a healthy way, which we can see she has very much carried into adulthood. Going back to the teen Shauna hat argument, after a few more insults, Melissa snaps and walks out, which Shauna does not like, because Shauna will be the one to tell Melissa when it's time to leave. She doesn't like her having her own agency, and this is where things get really ugly between the two of them, with Shauna shouting, "You think you're important, no one gave a sugar about you until me, and you're nothing," at Melissa. And a lot of this feels like Shauna's projection from her relationship with Jackie, where she thought of herself as nothing, invisible and second place. In fact, there are quite a few parallels between this Melissa and Shauna fight and the Shauna and Jackie fight in the finale of season 1, although Shauna is a lot meaner than Jackie ever was. And there are similarities with Melissa storming out, everyone watching them, and the fact that it starts to snow the same night Melissa leaves Shauna. And all of this connects to the circle theme we were discussing last episode, where history is repeating itself. Interestingly, Ella Purnell said in a Yellowjackets panel that Jackie loved Shauna and sensed that Shauna was pulling away, and so said some nasty things and was undermining and manipulative to try and keep her close, and that very much describes what's happening with Shauna and Melissa in this episode. As also discussed in previous reviews, I think Melissa left the phone with the Queen of Hearts song playing for Shauna. At least this is what the editing suggests in episode 2, and initially I thought this meant that Melissa and Shauna fell apart over a sacrifice hunt. But in light of the recent interview with Ben Seminoff, Melissa leaving Shauna that phone possibly signifies that Melissa is inviting Shauna to play dangerous games with her once again. Interestingly, in this season, it's been revealed that Van knows the cards, and Ty brings that up again in this episode in relation to their winter talk, where she says, "Good thing you've been practicing with the cards, and trust me, I'm going to see us through this. this. We just have to be smart. And this suggests that Ty and Van are probably about to be strategic and influence who does and doesn't get hunted. And I am guessing that Melissa ends up on their to be hunted list, because when adult Ty is chasing Melissa down the road, she says, "I got you this time," when she catches her, which implies that there has been a previous chase where Melissa got away, likely in the wilderness. Alongside this, in the kitchen scene where Misty says to Ty, "So you're going to take Shauna's side?" Melissa responds with, "Of course she is," which relates back to everything we've seen of Teen Ty standing with Shauna, against going with the outsiders to find rescue, and being on Shauna's team in general, so to speak. Now, I think if Melissa is picked for a hunt, Shauna will likely do nothing to help her, because she'll still be stewing in her anger. But there is a slim chance her feelings may get the better of her, and she does intervene to save Melissa. And I also think Hannah is involved in this situation too somehow. Either way, it will be interesting to see what happens. And Melissa being excluded from Shauna's group in the teen timeline explains why Melissa told Shauna in the adult timeline that she faked her own death to get away from them because she was no longer one of them anymore. Moving on to Callie and Jeff on that good kush. Now, a huge point of interest about this Callie and Jeff scene is that Jeff mentions a steak restaurant, which he believes is called Pigeon, with Callie correcting the name to squabs. And a squab is a young, specially raised pigeon that is eaten as food, which ties into both the bird theme and the cruelty in consumption theme that has been prominent this season. So this could be a clue that Jeff is about to die or potentially be sacrificed. The mention of a young bird could also indicate that it's Callie who kills him, or perhaps Callie takes a dirt nap too. In this scene, Callie also questions Jeff's true feelings about Shauna and encourages him to be honest by saying that she also feels the same way he does, that Shauna is crazy. Now, whether Callie truly feels this way or is just saying it to try and get information from her dad is another question. Jeff also reveals to Callie that he's lonely with Shauna and that marriage is hard. And this circles back to the fact that Shauna's marriage and life with Jeff is largely a lie, just as Melissa's life with Alex is. We know Shauna is largely an emotionally unavailable person, and that a lot of her relationship with Jeff is due to her unresolved issues with Jackie. It was never built on a foundation of true love. And all of this is pointing to the divorce theory coming true, if someone isn't widowed first. But interestingly, the squabs theory from this episode may be connected to this foreshadowing dialogue in season 1 that supports the theory that Callie may be the one to kill Jeff. Whether that's really the case, we'll have to wait and see. Moving on to Hannah and Cody. Now, Hannah's character takes an interesting turn this episode. She has been studying the girls, and Shauna in particular, to try and maximize her chances of survival. And there's both overt and subtle hints through the emotional acting that Hannah has been taking notes on Shauna's various relationships to people in the group, especially Melissa and Cody. So when Hannah is put in a life or death situation, she acts in a way which she has calculated will buy her the best chance of survival. And that's by A, committing an act of violence against someone Shauna doesn't like, and B, making herself a criminal so she's one of the group in the sense that she is a guilty party with something to lose if she snitches rather than an innocent outsider and witness. Of course, we know that Hannah's days are very much numbered, but for now at least she's bought herself some time. Before they try and break out of the camp, Hannah asks Cody about Eric Chong, to which Cody replies he got that rucksack from a thrift store. But do we believe him? Because like we have discussed in previous videos, there are clues linking Cody to Walter, and the surname Chong may have connections to Lottie and the Chinese theme. Now, it's possible those connections may mean nothing, they may be coincidental, maybe it's me reading into things that aren't that deep, but still worth considering all the same. What's interesting about Cody's character is that he introduces sexism and patriarchal ideals into this this female-dominated space. For example, he condescendingly talks about the girls braiding each other's hair and calls Shauna a little girl whilst questioning her ability to use a gun, which is why she retorted with the "my boyfriend taught me" comment. And there was also a moment in a previous episode where Cody was with Travis when they were ambushed by the group, and he gave Travis a look as if to say, "Are you going to let these women tell you what to do?" And I thought it would have been interesting to keep Cody around as a character, to see the contrast of his personality and mindset against these women who have been living in a space that's free of patriarchal expectations and sexism. I definitely thought they were going to do more with Cody's character, even if it was just plot-wise as opposed to social commentary, but boy was I wrong. And I think Cody being a nothing burger is the point. You don't assume that Hannah's going to be the one to lash out violently because she's an innocent seeming woman. You expect it of Cody, and that's the twist. Moving on to Travis and Lottie. So we see that Travis sets up the famous pit, and he lures Lottie out towards it, presumably with the intent of killing her, because she's hindering their chances of rescue. And the pit is a clever concept because Travis can claim that he created it to trap prey, and if someone happens to accidentally run across it, he's not necessarily to blame. However, things don't go to plan as Lottie brings up Harvey in their talk, and there's a slight breeze as she does so. And despite Travis's claims that he doesn't believe in it, you can see in this moment that Lottie gets to him. Lottie is mentally ill, but she's also an incredibly perceptive and manipulative character. And on top of bringing up Harvey, she then begins to walk over what looks to me to be fully over the trap. And yet she doesn't fall through. Now, a rational explanation for this is perhaps Travis overdid it with the branches and they were just strong enough to hold her. Maybe Lottie didn't walk far enough over the pit. But if you are a believer of the supernatural, you could interpret it as the wilderness protecting her. And this, alongside the Harvey breeze, clearly has Travis rethinking things. And we know that Travis develops an obsession with it in the adult timeline. So this could be the moment that catapults him into being a true believer. Lottie walking on the pit trap also has associations to Jesus walking on water. And we know Christianity has been a theme this season, with Jesus in the opening credits, Bridge Ben being tied in the form of a cross, the fish supper, and pretzels. And of course, all of this ties into the spiritual aspects of the show. But it could also suggest that someone will go through a rebirth, be redeemed, or may even return from the dead. I'm skeptical of the latter due to the interviews Simone and Lauren have given about their character deaths this season, but still, worth considering. Now, tensions are very high in the teen timeline. They have split into two groups, with one made up of people who want to get away with the outsiders, and one made up of people who want to stay because of various reasons. Now, personally, I'm not surprised Nat didn't put up a fight for the gun with Shauna, because Shauna is crazy. And I don't think Nat is physically strong enough to keep the gun from Shauna, which is what it comes down to. As discussed earlier, Team Rescue's getaway plans with the outsiders fall flat, and Shauna ends up finding out about these plans by the end of the episode too, which I imagine is going to be an issue for Team Rescue when it comes to the winter hunting rituals that we can see are taking place in the finale from the promo. A huge point of interest in the teen timeline this episode is that Nat discovers Misty and the transponder. Now, a lot of us were not sure if this was ever going to be touched upon again, and if Misty was always going to have this secret to herself. But I'm glad it's finally being exposed, because I suspect that we will finally get an insight into why adult Misty was so obsessed with adult Nat. This situation around the transponder and them getting rescued is surely going to be significant for their relationship. And of course, it also connects to the scene in season 1 where Nat suspects Misty has messed around with her car and roots around in Misty's glove compartment only to have her suspicions confirmed. Now, I've read various theories about what people think will happen with Nat, Misty, and the transponder. A lot of people think that Misty will be the one to fix it, but Nat will be the one to take credit for it. But I'd love to know your predictions. My theory about Misty and Nat is that Misty may try and kiss Nat, or vice versa. And I know you're probably thinking that's a delusional lesbian tinfoil hat theory, but Sophie Thatcher mentioned the word bi-curious in an interview for the show, and we haven't really seen any bi-curious activity from the characters yet, which suggests that it's incoming. We can also see that Nat saved multiple tickets for Team Dresch, a lesbian punk rock band that makes overtly queer music, in her storage space. And I could need glasses here, but it looks to me as though Misty is holding some kind of harness when she is going through Nat's stuff. So the hints are hinting. The only other person I can see Nat trying to get close to in that way is Lottie, which would explain the chemistry adult Nat and Lottie had throughout season 2. But we'll just have to wait and see. And finally, moving on to Misty and Walter. Now, the biggest point of interest to me in this episode pertaining to these two is Shauna talking about cats, because of course, both Misty and Walter are associated with cats. Now, Shauna says she was trying to find a cat that was exactly the same as this other cat, which I suspect relates to Walter and Misty, especially with Walter regarding Misty as his intellectual equal, Sherlock and Moriarty style. And Shauna says that Jeff was trying to find that cat for his karma. Now, this could be a clue that Jeff and Walter are going to end up being connected somehow, and it could also be a clue that Walter is using Misty to enact revenge on someone. Interestingly, Misty also makes a quip about A Tale of Two Cats, which I assume is a playful reference to the book A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And interestingly, from what I can see, and full disclosure here, I have not read this book and have only researched what it's about, and from what I can see, A Tale of Two Cities is about parallels to the past, fake identities, redemption, and a man who willingly sacrifices himself by pretending to be another man who is due to be executed. And it's very possible that these aspects of the book may be relevant to either Jeff or Walter's upcoming storylines, especially considering the cat connection. If anybody else has any thoughts and theories on how A Tale of Two Cities may be relevant to the characters this season, please feel free to add them to the comments. Now, when Misty explains about the Shauna cat story to Walter, Walter is unconvinced and says maybe the cat waited in the car during the murder. And this is a point of interest because it may be a hint that there were two people involved in Lottie's murder, and one of them waited in the car whilst the other went to see her. It may also be a clue that somebody was spying on someone else from a car when it happened. It's also notable in this scene that Misty seems bothered about things not quite adding up, but Walter doesn't, and in fact he tries to gaslight Misty by saying, "When it comes to the Yellowjackets, I feel your judgment is a touch clouded." And we know there have been several hints that Walter isn't a fan of Misty's relationship with the other Yellowjackets, especially Shauna. And this leads us back to the Walter and Melissa connection, which is one possible explanation of Walter's disdain for Shauna. However, another possibility, be it a slim one, is if it turns out Jeff has done something awful behind the scenes, there could be a further twist or layer to Melissa and Walter interfering with Shauna's life. Walter also brings out the clone of Lottie's phone upon Misty's request, and when he's distracted, Misty picks up the phone and sees something shocking, causing her to disappear. So, what did she see on that phone? Now, I don't think it's anything that incriminates Melissa or Walter. Melissa, because Walter is theorized to have a connection with her, so why would he leave evidence that incriminates her on a phone? And Walter, because again, why would he hand evidence of a crime he committed over to Misty? Especially when A, he's not stupid, and B, he's, we assume, in love with Misty and doesn't want to tank that relationship. In fact, there's likely nothing on that phone that Walter doesn't want Misty to see. So I think Misty has seen something related to someone else, and I'm going to guess it's either Jeff or Callie, and that's why it's a shock to her. I can't see Misty being that shocked to see something incriminating Shauna specifically, or even Ty, as she already suspected both of them of being guilty initially. But let me know your thoughts and theories about this down in the comments. Further points of interest surrounding Walter this episode are when Misty gets dropped off to meet Walter. She mentions the taxi driver's aquarium ornaments, and after Misty gets in Walter's helicopter, the scene switches to teen Misty collecting water. And these are both huge indicators that the finale is going to involve Walter and his boat, which connects to the theory that Shauna is going to end up stealing Walter's boat, and the theory that Shauna is going to end up in water, possibly drowning or nearly drowning. And if we apply the Thelma and Louise theory to this, Misty may be the one to save her. murder. Although personally, I think the finale will end on a Shauna might be dead cliffhanger. Even more interestingly, it's looking like there's a connection between Walter and Callie, as both are seen with graters in this episode. Callie with a cheese grater on her desk, and Walter grating chocolate in his kitchen. Now, there are so many potential theories pertaining to a Walter and Callie connection, especially ones tied up into Lottie's murder. And please let me know if you have any thoughts or theories on what a possible Walter and Callie connection might mean down in the comments. Personally, I think the graters are a clue that someone, probably Melissa due to the Princess Bride theory, is going to end up having some of their skin peeled off. And I think just like Shauna, the finale is going to end on a Melissa might be dead cliffhanger, which would very neatly tie into their mirror theme. And finally, after Misty has left, Walter's expression changes to a more serious one. And this is the mask finally dropping, and a clue that there's about to be, we hope, some serious revelations about his character next episode. I've been saying for a long time he's the big bad of this season, and I'm holding on tighter than Misty's wig in this scene for this finale. Okay guys, let me know your thoughts and theories on episode 9 down in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe for instant disappointment, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.